hopefully. All right, I think we are live on Facebook. So thank you everybody on Facebook joining us.
Yes, welcome to Smart with Your Money Live. I'm Chase Peckham. I am the Director of Community Outreach and Education at the San Diego Financial Literacy Center, the education arm of DebtWave Credit Counseling. I am joined, as always, weekly with my cohort, Felipe Arevalo, who is our Community Outreach Coordinator at the SDFLC. And as I mentioned just a few seconds ago before we started and went live, Felipe, this is one of my favorite topics, and believe it or not, it's quite popular on our speaking engagements. It is truly something that we see, especially with young people getting into when they're going out to buy their car for the first time. Really say, oh, I made a few mistakes.
It's definitely one of those where oftentimes as young people learn the hard way, but you don't have to.
Including myself, by the way.
Yeah. It doesn't. We don't exclude ourselves when we say most people.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we're needed to be included in that category. That goes for most of these topics. So, car buying. What should you know? What should you do? What should you do to prepare? And we'll get started. We have five tips here, and we'll go from there. First, set yourself a car budget. How much money do you have to spend on that car? How much, and you don't have to spend all your money on that car. How much money can you realistically, comfortably spend on whatever car that you're looking to purchase?
And this is interesting, Felipe, because you can look at this a couple different ways, right? A lot of people these days, especially, will think about, well, what is my monthly payment going to be? Can I afford that monthly payment within the budget? But a lot of times you've got to think about not just the monthly payment that you're going to have, but how long are you going to have it? How much is the actual car going to cost you by the time you're done
Yeah.
paying it off? If you plan on, having it through the entire time that you have the finances.
Yeah, and it's something you want to definitely take into account. It can determine what kind of car you get, what kind of vehicle. It doesn't have to be a car. Can you afford a, you know, larger vehicle, a smaller vehicle? You're going to have to try and determine. It'll determine, new, used, high price range, low price range. So with everything personal finances, I know you guys probably get tired of hearing us say it, but it's important to set a budget for yourself, and then go over, when you're setting this budget, go over all the different. Tip number two, remember the other factors to vehicle price. It's not just the sticker price. There's so much more to it than you driving past a car lot and saying, "Ooh, look at that one! It's $10,000, 9,999," because they're never going to put $10,000. It's $9,999,
Right.
and that's how much I'm going to pay. But there's so much more to it. It can, getting a new or newer vehicle can increase your insurance costs. What is the projected maintenance? And some of these are variables that you can't take into account. You buy a used car, you can't be 100% sure what that maintenance is going to be like. Um,
Exactly. And it depends. I mean, you can go through, there are those factory certified used cars, right? I mean, if you go
right.
to a legitimate dealership, a larger dealership, they will certify those cars. If they're 2 or 3, 1 years old, uh, it's not going to be too far away from being a new car, right? Except that you're not paying for the value of the brand new car that you just drove off the lot. And so you're going to have a little bit of, okay, leeway. Maybe it's still that you have a little bit of the factory warranty involved. But if you're buying a used car that could be years and years old, and you know that you're driving lots of miles, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to incur some kind of maintenance along the way.
Yeah, and other things to consider, like your resale value. If you think you may have to get rid of the car in the future, obviously, if you're going to drive the car until it just doesn't go anymore, which isn't a bad thing if you can keep the maintenance down. How long is it? How long is that going to be? Is it going to, break down on you and be worth fixing it long term, short term? Fuel economy and fuel type. You'll notice with some cars, maybe you don't get to pump that regular unleaded gas. You have to pump the expensive gas, which is an increased cost. So the gas mileage doesn't look that different, but now you're having to pump, the high gas instead of the lower one. Safety ratings, that can come into play. Recalls is not on here, but you check to see if you're buying a used car, have there been recalls? Has that car had the recalls fixed? I know a few years back, a big one was airbags. And it seems like 1 out of 2 people I knew had their car recalled because of airbags. Um, License and registration fees, value of your old car. If you have an old car and you're getting rid of it or you're looking to replace, and then a big one with your finances, and this one kind of leads us to the next slide, is the length of your car loan. Which brings us to, how are you going to pay for your car? And your budget will determine a lot of this. If you are buying a used car, and you don't plan on spending a lot, maybe you've saved up, and you can go ahead and pay that outright, in cash, and not have a car payment, which is always a good thing. Or maybe you need to finance it. Maybe you saved up a lot of money and you're going to buy an expensive car cash also. There's no reason you can't do that as well. But how do you plan on paying for this car?
Right. And again, we talk about length, right? Especially when it comes to financing. Do you walk onto the car lot and then you just take whatever financing deal and terms and length that salesperson, when they talk about, we're going to go over to our finance office and discuss our options. Do you just take that kind of deal? You got to think too, if you're buying a used car that's, let's say, 3 years old, and then you do a 6-year loan, by the time you're done with that car, that's a 9-year-old car. That and we don't think about that because it's new to us, right? So you have
Right.
to take into consideration, if when I'm done paying for this, how old is that car going to be? And not just the fact, are you going to be kind of like over it because it really feels old and it's, a couple different models old from the newer version of this car, but how is it going to be running by then? And how much are you going to be dumping into it? Because that car payment's still going to be the same.
Yeah. And technology changes so much that, the car you drive, if you buy a used one and then they switch models 2 or 3 times, the difference between the car that you're driving and the cars that are available, even the used ones that are available, are going to be, huge. And then you
Funny you
might get
say.
in someone else's car and look around and be like, wow, my car has none of this.
Yes. And what's really funny about that is my wife, when she got her new Yukon, we bought it used. She looked for a long time and she loved it. And she's like, gosh, the technology is amazing. And then finally it was time for me. And I got a new truck for me, a used one, but new for me, but it had Apple CarPlay. And she's all of a sudden she's going, she didn't have any of that. And now she's, and it's just literally a year or two older.
Yeah. And different manufacturers step up to the technology
Right.
levels at different stages. I remember my last car didn't have anything.
I
And,
couldn't call you when you were in the
no,
car.
no Bluetooth, no color, any just kind of display, no backup cameras, none of that. So when my wife got a newer car, I started writing in hers, and it has, in my case, the Google Android Auto. But and then I'm looking at my car, like my phone doesn't even hook up to my car, and the technology just changes so significantly as the years go by. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to finance your car, if you're going to pay it outright, kudos to you.
Absolutely.
That's really good, because you're not going to pay any finance charges. What you pay out front is what you pay, aside from the regular maintenance that everyone's gonna get. If you're going to finance your car, though, which many Americans do, secure your financing before you visit the lot, before you go look at cars. Go to your local credit union or bank and get pre-approved for an auto loan. Find the best rate around. Find the best rate for you at this point in time. It changes from time to time. They may have promotions, and go get pre-approved.
Yeah, and that's Felipe, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's probably the number one thing we would tell people to do. Because remember, buying a car, as we all know, when we walk on that lot, it's so emotional and you get so excited and you sit in the car and you test drive it and that new car smell and all the different technologies that you were talking about. We can go in, and if you don't know what you can afford and what you've already done, you could probably, which I have done and driven off the lot and then, didn't feel good about it 6 months later because I didn't get the best deal I could possibly get. And you are in a position of power. If you go into a credit union or bank and you get pre-qualified, like you mentioned, you go in and you know how much you can afford a car and you know exactly what that payment's going to be going in and what your interest rate's going to be, then you are way ahead of the game. And you know, when you go in there that I can get that car and I know exactly what's going to happen, and you don't have to haggle. It is what it is.
Right. Yeah. You have and they're usually good for like a 30-day window. So you can apply, get pre-approved. They give you the parameters that car needs to fit into, and then you go off car shopping. And then as you go, you find the car, and then you have your financing. Now, if the dealership can obviously, if they can beat that, which is really hard to do on a used vehicle, except for right now, there's a lot of extra incentives for like certified used. But unless you're getting a new one where you might be able to get 0% financing through the manufacturer or something like that, it's going to be hard for the dealership to beat your offer that you've done the research and looked for. So be prepared, and that just removes one extra step that you have to worry about the day you're out there looking for a car. And
100%.
Chase, we have a question here from the Facebook. And the question is, how does leasing a car compare to buying a car? Is leasing an okay financial decision if you're unsure of what you can afford or how old your car may be in the time you're done paying it off?
Oh, that's a great question and pretty timely, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's two types of thoughts of leasing a car, and it depends on a few factors. Financially, people would say, or professionals would say, that leasing a car is probably not the smartest financial, because as much as a car loses its value when you leave, and you would think it's a depreciating asset when you drive it off the lot, it's still going to be yours when it's done being paid off, right? I mean, and you still would be able to sell it for, you're definitely not going to sell it for what you bought it for, but you could still sell it for something, right? Where with a lease, you're going to turn it back in. But leases can work in certain situations. I leased my car for a long time when I was working, and it ended up being an okay situation because the situation where the offer was great. So I didn't have to put anything down. Now, that's the biggest thing with a lease too, is when you go in, they're going to ask, it's great if you have a payment of $200 or $149 lease, but if they're asking for a $3,000 down payment, that's like money you're just throwing away, right? You're not getting anything back for that $3,000. You're just getting a lower car payment. So you have to ask yourself, is it the smartest thing? Now, a lot of times the way they get us in with leases is because you can get more car for your bucks, so to speak. But eventually you're going to have to turn that back in. And these great deals are going to depend on mileage. How often do you drive? How much do you drive? A lot of these really good warrant lease deals are with 8,000 miles a year, 10,000 miles a year. And if you go over, they can be as much as a quarter to 50 cents a mile. That is going to add up. And believe me, I got stuck in that situation where I ended up having to go to a dealer and then try to trade that car in and buy another car because I was so far over my miles that I was going to end up paying $10,000 extra. And that was difficult. So if you can do the math and you can figure out if this situation is right for you, and you drive under a certain amount and you find the right deal, believe me, because they're car dealerships, car manufacturers, they are looking to give incentives right now, especially because people are just not buying. So the deal can be had, but make sure you do that deal through those manufacturers and through those legitimate dealerships.
Yeah. And another thing, if you have already been leasing and maybe your lease is coming to an end here soon, this last year, you maybe didn't drive as much as you usually do. Right. So you might actually have, when turning in that lease, equity in that lease. And it's a rare situation. Normally it wouldn't happen. But if you had a 3-year lease and you haven't been driving for the last year, you're probably well under mileage. And there's a chance that that vehicle is worth more than your buyout option on that lease. If that's the case, you do want to do your research, because you may have 2 or 3 in a very rare situation, because of, maybe you're not driving as much. You might have, thousands of dollars worth of equity in that car. So you definitely want to check that out if you do have a lease and you're looking to, or it's coming due, whether or not purchasing it and selling it, or trying to get some of that when you turn it back in, and making sure you get the required value for that vehicle.
For sure.
Yeah, not a common thing though. But if you haven't been driving as much this last year, and it's a 3-year lease, that's a third of the time. So you could potentially have some value there.
Absolutely.
All right. So don't get oversold. And Chase mentioned it earlier, but car buying is like many other things, emotional. And it's easy to, sit in a car and then, this is a little over my budget, but I really like these seats, or I really like this steering wheel buttons, or, you start looking for a used car, and then you see the one that fits your budget, and they say, for just a little more, you can get that one over there.
Yeah.
And it just becomes easy once you're there to just say, oh, I could reach up a little. And it's important that you have your budget, stick to your budget.
Yeah, especially, and somebody asked a question earlier and asked about warranties. And that's really when you get into that negotiating situation, when you sit down with the financier, you go through the paperwork and everything, there's going to be a bunch of things offered to you. And, you get those pieces of paper and they'll say, we just want you to sign this because, stating that we offered this warranty. And warranties are a big thing that you can be upsold. That's part of the deal at a dealership. And, there are all kinds now. You can go online and you can basically these warranties that you can buy for yourself when you're talking about maintenance and oil changes and those kinds of things. It's almost like buying another insurance, but for a different thing, right? It's not for an accident, but they're typically third party, and you're going to pay, for it. So what you need to do is sit back and assess. Really, it's going to be, do you have an older car? Are you buying a used car that might be 5 years old? Is it worth it? Because most of the time, you're not going to get a manufacturer warranty unless it's brand new. Typically, they're not going to offer that kind of thing. You'll get the certified warranty, which will probably add anywhere from 15,000 to 20,000 miles over whatever factory warranty is still going on that car. But if not, very rarely is it going to be through the manufacturer. So a lot of times what happens with these, it's just like insurance. So let's say you have a claim and something breaks. You are going to have to take it to the dealership. They're going to have to send a report to this third-party warranty company, and then they're going to make a decision on whether they cover that or not. Sometimes it's the whole is, if it's too good to be true, it is. Look, there's legitimate companies out there. There are great, there are good warranty deals out there, but you also have to read the fine print. There are going to be some things that just aren't covered. And it might be, we don't cover parts that are reusable plastic, right? So that's the kind of thing that you need to look into when it comes to paying for warranties, because let's face it, none of us love paying for oil changes. None of us love, having to rotate our tires. None of us love to buy new tires, and none of us want to, do the rear and rear differential and right. There's all this stuff that we never hear about when they walk up to us and go, hey, that rear differential needs to be updated. It needs to be flushed. And you're like, I don't even know what that is.
I didn't even know there was liquid back there.
You think you're being upsold, right? My wife to this day she won't go get the oil change because she thinks, they tell her something's wrong with her car all the time, and she doesn't know if she's being upsold. So it's a really difficult situation. Look, the marketing makes it sound great. Do your homework.
Yeah.
Chances are you're going to be better off putting 25, 30, $50 away every month just into a budget, into an account that you're going to pay for those types of car maintenance. And
Yeah.
you know that that money's already there and you're not going to be charged more for it. So, I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
typically the
they
way I would
add,
lean.
like now they even add, you want to build a maintenance plan sometimes when you buy a car. And
Right.
you do the math on how much you're getting for this maintenance plan. And if you just add up all the services, you end up not even saving that much money. It just seems like you are because you're putting the money away on you're paying it on a monthly basis. But is it worth that extra $20, $30? And Chase mentioned you might be able to start putting that money away. And then you get a car at at a place, if they offer services, they're going to start mailing you coupons. They're going to start sending you little reminders. We haven't seen you. Your oil change is due. Here's a 10% off, 20% off. So you might not even have to pay full price for the services as you start to get them. And why pay them up front? Um, and Chase, we
Right.
have another question from Facebook. Is it okay to stretch your budget and get the car you really want, or at least a car that is more reliable than the car you can afford to pay in cash? I've seen conflicting advice from various financial professionals, and I'm not sure being debt free is always better than having an auto loan. What do you think?
Okay, so that's a very
Multiple part
insightful
question.
question. Yeah, it's a really good question. And there's kind of a couple rules of thought. You know, there are the people that say that debt period is bad. But you also have to consider that a vehicle is something that most of us need, especially in California, right? I mean, we're not New York, we're not Chicago. We don't have
We're not San
really
Francisco.
great San
Exclusion of
Francisco,
San
great
Francisco.
public transportation. A vehicle is a necessity. And a lot of times we got to get ourselves to work in normal times, get our kids to school, whatever it might be. Having a car that is that you can rely on is incredibly important. So, and not only, I mean, you can also, you're building your credit when you're making a car payment all the time. Now, stretching your budget. We talk about this in when we're putting together budgets all the time. You're going to have to make a decision. The goal is you're going to pay less. You want to spend less than you make, right? Every single month, your goal is to not go into debt on a monthly basis where you're spending more than you're bringing in. Now, if you are doing the math and you know that I'm going to spend, let's say, less every month on a cable bill and other factors, and then you stretch your vehicle budget a little bit more, as long as you're still under what's coming in and you're spending less than what's coming in, then that's okay, because that's very much a personal choice. And if you're going to be stressed that you pay cash for a car and you think it's going to break every 5 seconds and it's constantly going to be in the shop, which means that now you have to bum a ride and now you have to ask neighbors and friends and everything else to get your kids to school or baseball practice or dance lessons or whatever it might be, then it possibly is worth it to do that kind of thing. That's a very personal thing. Now,
Yeah.
and nobody should tell you or make you
And
feel
there's so
bad
many
one way or the other.
factors that go into
Absolutely.
play. You know, there was a debate on this on the personal finance Twitter world a while back on this, and people were saying like, how many times should you fix a car before you replace it? And you know, back in my college days, I'd tow it, fix it, replace it. I'd break down again, tow it again, fix it. I have kids now. I don't have the luxury of being able to break down in the rain on the freeway anymore like I did when I was 18, 19, 20. So there's other factors that go into play as far as you know, the reliability. If you can afford it within your financial means, you know, at some point there's no, you shouldn't have to not be able to because some other financial professional said that you should. If you can afford it, you know, we all have to make tough financial decisions on a regular basis, and you can find positives and negatives for both arguments.
Right. But I mean, if you, again, if you're in a situation where you are using credit cards, going into debt every month, and you know, you're considering that your budget, and then you go out and buy a newer car that is a little bit above the budget and you're staying in that same cycle, then no, that's not the right situation to go about it. But
Yeah.
again, if you're putting together a budget and you're looking at a certain amount that you can spend every month and that you can get a vehicle that's reliable, because let's face it, if you have no car payment, but you're spending a lot of money constantly getting that car fixed, then you're throwing out a lot of money that way too. So there is there is a way to be able to make sure that you are responsibly financially getting a reliable vehicle and staying within your budget. But that's the important thing is staying
such a
within that
case by
budget. Nobody
case.
says that a brand new Nissan or a brand new Toyota that you shouldn't do that because it's a little bit more expensive than if you bought a used car. If it was within your budget, do what you feel comfortable with, because you're the one doing it, not anybody else. Great question.
That's a great question. Yeah. All right. And lastly, enjoy your car. You went ahead, you made the purchase, you've made the right financial decision. Cars are, as Chase mentioned, for us here in California, it's just useful. I mapped out using Google one time how long it would take me to get from where I live to the office. And first it said you can't get there on time. Service doesn't start that early. And then it said it'd take me an hour and a half. That's a 20-minute commute in a car. And, that's a
Time
big
is money.
difference. That's a big difference. And that's a big factor. So, you have after you've made the right financial decisions, enjoy your car, take care of your car as much as you can so that you don't have to repeat the process anytime soon, hopefully. And don't drive it like this. Any other questions? We've had some great ones today.
Yeah, it's been really
any
good.
other questions or ideas?
Look, I'll just mention one more time that, a vehicle is a big purchase for a lot of people, and it is something that we will stress about. But if you go through the process, the checklist, like anything else, and you know that it's within your budget, you know that you've been pre-qualified by your bank or your credit union, and then you know what interest rate you're going to pay, it makes the whole car buying experience so much easier than when you just go in and say, gosh, I just really like the Ford's F-150, and I'm going to go in there and and all of a sudden you test drive it, and that car salesman knows that you feel so comfortable in that seat and that steering wheel. You're probably going to not make the most responsible decision, and responsible is probably not the right word, but you're going to be a little bit more emotional in the buying process.
Yeah. I tell people, when, friends, family, go car shop, go test drive all the ones you need to test drive, and
Yeah.
make it known to yourself, I'm not buying a car today. I'm going to test drive it. I'm going to go home, sleep on it. Maybe you do it over on a weekend, and then you go home and you sleep on it for a week, and then you determine which one you want, and then you can start looking for the best deal. If you're afforded that time. Sometimes, for whatever reason or other, the cars need to be replaced faster. But if you have the time, give yourself that leeway. And we do have, if you're interested to continue learning, we don't have a car episode yet. It's coming soon.
Actually, coming soon. Next couple of weeks.
Soon. Next couple of weeks, we will have a car buying with a professional on your rights as a consumer when purchasing a vehicle. But we do have a clip from one of our previous episodes. I don't know if it's going to be too loud, so watch your volume there. I've never tried embedding a video into the PowerPoint, but here's a video sound clip of a recent video where we talked about cars.
Or we're not going to hear it at all.
Very loud.
I don't think we're hearing it out here, Phil.
I don't think you're hearing it? Okay. So maybe I'm the only one hearing it, in which case it is Talk Wealth to Me. You find it wherever you find your podcast. The particular episode that we talked about cars, and mostly those car commercials where people show up and they surprise their significant other with a car and a giant bow on the top. There was an SNL skit. So it is episode, I believe, 67, and it's communicate. The episode's on communication in personal finances, but a big component of that is those car commercials where, don't go buying a car for your significant other without first talking it over with them. And that's a big financial decision that should be done together. I'd be upset if my wife showed up and said, hey, I've replaced your car. Here's a bigger, more expensive one that's less fuel efficient.
We're all different. That was a good one.
Yeah. So check that out if you're a podcast listener. Other than that, we look forward
we'll see you back here in a couple weeks. Yeah. Protecting your identity. This is a big one, especially right now through COVID. It's gotten crazy with the different scams that are out there. So everybody, hopefully we'll see you March 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern and 10 p.m. Pacific. If there aren't any other questions, we will say thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.